All right, here we are. Welcome to Ward Wrestling Live again. It's Tuesday, I think. It usually seems like one big day, one big week. But I got a surprise guest. A gentleman reached out to me a couple weeks ago, said, "Hey, man, I listened to your show and it's dope." And I was like, "Well, thank you. I appreciate it." And his name is Daniel Shee. He started a small show on his own called the Mental Takedown, which he does on YouTube and then distributes it. He just kind of does the psychology of wrestling. He's had 4 or 5 guests already that are wrestlers in our country. But he reached out and he said, he feels there's a real big issue with one of our big media companies who are affecting the long-term, or, not helping the long-term effect of wrestling and are really hurting it. And he did some extenuous research. And of course, he's going to tell you why he believes they are hurting it. And then on the other end, he's going to say, hey, here are the things I believe you can do to fix that. Correct?
Yeah.
Cool. So we have him here today. His name is Daniel Shee. Surprisingly enough, he is going to be a junior in high school out in Houston. So a smart young man. I appreciate him reaching out to me, and I don't turn anyone away. So here he is. How are you, Daniel Shee, man? What's happening, my brother? Thanks for reaching out.
We're hanging in there, just taking it day by day. Quarantine is, I'm not immune from being stuck inside all day.
Yeah, I've been inside since March 12th or something. It's been crazy. Do you know anybody else that has been home every day through this and not out in public?
I mean, I think most of us have been stuck inside for quite a while, actually. And I have quite a bit of family.
It's not just my life that's crazy?
Yeah, exactly.
How's it out there in Texas? What has how has the pandemic affected your state and your area and, your schools and just life in general?
Well, obviously the situation has become quite messy, as we all know. I think we're all pretty much well aware of the statistics that, we kind of attempted to try and start to reopen, and then the numbers seem to have taken a turn for the worse. And I guess we'll leave it up to our governmental officials to try and sort through the mess best they can.
Yeah, and fingers crossed that we have a wrestling season this year. That's the goal. And I know high school associations are starting to come out with their plans. And I know some people have extended it into April. Some schools are starting later than usual. Some schools are saying we're going to start with a stay-at-home school and then slowly get back into being at the school level. So we'll kind of see what happens. Is that what's going on in your state as well?
Yeah, we have decided that all schools will reopen in some form of capacity with a mandatory mask order. That's what the governor has decided to pursue in his path. We'll see how that plays out. We'll see if that actually comes to fruition. But only time will tell whether that was the right plan to go with.
For sure. Well, again, welcome. I know you reached out to me and you said, "Hey, man, I saw your show with the Stanford kids and I just broke my heart. And I've been doing a bunch of research on why I think this is going on in our country. And I went back all the way to, I think you said like 2005 or something,
2007, right? And that was the first year of FLO. That was basically the first full calendar year that FLO Sports was started out of the back of a van, or at least they say.
So that was my next question. So bring it now, who's the big media company that you are saying is hurting our sport and can do more?
Well, of course, in wrestling, there are not many options. In, other more mainstream sports, you have maybe 5, 10, 15 different media outlets where you can pick and choose where you get your information from. But in wrestling, it really is just the only FLO Sports in general, really, not even just FLO Wrestling, but the structure of FLO Sports itself. And then, there is track, there are obviously other much smaller media companies, like I don't know if I can call myself a media company because I don't really produce media per se on a day-to-day basis, but obviously there are smaller media companies, but the objective view of it is the majority of the market share belongs to FLO.
Right, and so you've you went all the way back to their first year in existence, um, and all the stuff that you've researched is all public knowledge. You haven't dug up anything that's private, and you even say, I've read through your findings that you sent to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And by the way, to the public, all these findings he's going to put together kind of like an article, and he's going to insert it, so you guys will get to see that after the show. He just asked that we waited till after the show to release it to you guys. So he will be releasing all his information and research that he's done and what he believes needs to be done to be corrected. So, all right, we'll start off, man. So you started all the way back in whenever the slow decline of D1 college wrestling over the past 15 years. But, tell us the research you've done, what you found out. Talk to us.
Okay, so basically this started when Stanford, obviously, as we all know in the wrestling community, announced, I think about a month ago now, or 3 weeks ago, that, they were discontinuing their program after 2021. And obviously, as we also know, Stanford isn't the only program that cut. I think what has largely gone unnoticed is Old Dominion's program is also ending this year, unfortunately. And I basically, you can only, my thought process was you can only call so many athletic directors corrupt, right? Not every AD in this country is corrupt. Not every president is out to destroy college sports. So why is it that systematically that wrestling, it feels like, is being targeted out of all the NCAA championship sports? So, well, the common denominator here is what I often look at when trying to solve a problem that's been going on for a long time. What is the one thing that has been perceived to be an ally by the majority of the public or the majority of the portion of the community? And for many, many years, people were very, very happy with how FLO was doing things, how they were creating films, creating content for the rest of the community. Their FLO Wrestling Live radio show that's been going on for 530, 40 episodes now. And oftentimes when you start looking at them, because sometimes the enemy is right under your noses. So I kind of broke this research into many, many parts. First, I looked at kind of how FLO's finance, are they making money? Because this is the first thing we need to establish, because if they are not making money, then that makes my job very easy. I could literally come on here and say, okay, we need to begin to set up the infrastructure for another platform because FLO's about to go bankrupt. But that's not the case. They are making money. They don't release any official numbers. They're a very private company. It's very, very hard to find official numbers. The numbers that I could find through third-party websites, I'm not sure where they source their information from. I got the low estimation of around $20 million and upwards of about $50 million. So that's a decent amount of incoming revenue year over year. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they are making a lot of money. Now, also, when digging deeper more into their financial history, you'll realize here that in the past year, they have brought on $50 million of investor money through some kind of combination of either a line of credit on the company or through straight equity deals. And what that means is, it's not a bad thing to have debt to invest in the company, because this is a media company, it is a startup, it requires a lot, it's very capital intensive, but there is a lot of pressure on FLO, having taken out basically a $47 million loan last year. And I don't know about you, but if I could borrow $5 from you, I would want to return it to you as fast as I could. And if I borrowed $47 million, that's a big chunk of pocket change. And
And what you're saying, look, profit's not a dirty word. If you can make money, that's not what the argument is here, right?
yeah, so they are making money. So that means FLO, so they must have done something right to get to this point, right? You don't convince some of the biggest venture capitalist firms in the world to give you $47 million. They don't just turn over money like it's Christmas. You know, they obviously pick and choose which companies they invest in. But it does obviously increase the financial pressure on the company. And what I have here in my notes is, do you know the company Kind that you see at the grocery store everywhere that sells little bars?
Yes.
They've done over $1 billion in revenue year over year, and they have only raised in their history $5.2 million. Like, they've only taken $5 million of venture debt on their company ever. And now, before everyone comes after me, because I know there are some smart cookies in the college wrestling community that have MBAs and they're way smarter than me. I get it. FLO's a media company. They're a food company. Obviously, the media company is going to be much more capital intensive. But the original point still stands that FLO has pressure. You know, when you borrow millions and millions of dollars, you want to return it back.
So going down here, I see where now you get into, you know, what does this prove? What does this mean? You talk about how they grew subscribers. So where are you going with that?
Sure. Okay, so they claim that they have a couple 100,000 subscribers. Again, there are no official numbers. They don't release the official numbers of subscribers that they have on the website. So this does seem to suggest that they are growing. And they also say that they're growing subscribers by more than 50% year over year. So there is growth as far as the financials of FLO in and of itself. So which means there is money coming in. There is a product that people enjoy that FLO is producing. So money is coming in. And this is ultimately where we need to find out where that money is going, because we're not seeing the growth throughout the wrestling sport, throughout the wrestling community that we should be seeing if there's this much money coming in, which could mean either one of two things. And the first being much more likely. One, that FLO is banking the money for themselves, or two, they're lying and that's fraud, and we should get off this call and call, you know, the appropriate people. But, you know, I don't want to go there because one, there's no evidence for it, and two, you know, let's not be that pessimistic. So the much more likely of the two is that money is hiding somewhere in Austin, let's say.
Yeah. So now you got into this, and then as we get down further, now you get into the decline of D1 college wrestling over the past 15 years. You talk about the drop programs from 2007 to 2015. You talk about added programs. So talk about why you think that FLO has created that decline, or not created it. I don't think you think that FLO said, because we're FLO, we've declined wrestling, but why do you think they've had an effect on that, and could have had a negative effect, not a positive effect, and could have done things differently? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So sure, well, first of all, we have to prove that there is a decline, and obviously based on the number of programs that have been discontinued since the existence of FLO, that is beginning in 2007, we have lost 16 programs and gained, I believe it's 16, yes, we've lost 16 programs, and there are 6 new programs. So,
and you just researched the D1 level, correct?
Yes, and I'll get into why I only researched the D1 level, because the majority of FLO's coverage, let's be honest, is of the D1 level. And I think that ultimately, even though there are D2 and D3 options for many athletes, I think many kids' dreams nowadays is still to wrestle for a D1 program.
Sure. Because there has been many programs added at the NAIA.
D2 and D3 level, yes.
Okay. So this research was just done to the D1 level and keep going. Sorry, I just want to make sure that people knew that.
Yeah. So going back to kind of how this whole investigation started, it makes it highly unlikely that Stanford, the institution of Stanford, is responsible for the decline of sport of wrestling at the sport. It makes it highly unlikely. You can only call so many ADs selfish, corrupt, bad people, whatever you want to call them. So we must look for alternative reasons as to why these programs are being cut. And then also, secondarily, this also proves that any growth or any new program that has been created throughout this 12 years, or throughout these 12, 13 years, give or take, has been heavily outweighed, let's say, by the overall decline in the programs being cut. And then, so now we're going to go ahead and move on. So now we've established that wrestling overall as a sport is not doing too well, especially at the D1 collegiate level. Well, now we need to look at, we've established earlier that FLO is making money, but is FLO Wrestling, as you know, FLO Sports as an entire company has 24, 25 different sports that they cover. They cover just about every sport in the book. You name it, they cover it. Is the FLO Wrestling portion of the business actually making money? Well, as I said earlier, the difficulty of finding financial data on just not even FLO, the company itself, it's much even harder to find financial information on how each subsidiary sport is divided and what the revenue amount, how much of that $50-60 million is coming from FLO Wrestling. So I thought for a minute and thought about what we could do to kind of at least get some form of gauge. And instantly what I thought in this day and age was social media followers. How much do each and every one of their sports that they cover, how wide is their audience base? And it became very clear to me very quickly, even though I already had a pretty good intuition, that wrestling is their second most followed social media account out of like, I think 20, 24, 25.
So with that being said, is the argument that with that large of a platform and so many people watching you, why aren't they promoting the sport better? Is that what you're saying? Could they be, for example, we don't see the women promoted as much. We don't see all the college athletes at D1 or lower marketed, correct? Is that what you're saying? They need to be more focused on that, or what are you saying their poor structure is, and how they kind of take advantage of the wrestling community, in your words, and what is your belief that they can do to kind of get back on track? So what you're saying is they're just looking to make money to get the subscribers, but the content is just become garbage, or what, or just kind of not focused on the proper things?
No, I don't think the content has become garbage at all, let's say. I don't know really, because it would be kind of hypocritical for me to be a FLO Pro member and then do all this research. So I personally have never had access to all the amazing films that the wrestling community claims that FLO produces, but we'll take them at their word. But basically what this portion of the research is trying to show is, if you have that big of a follower base, which means people do care, right? People still do care about the sport of wrestling. It's still there. And you have almost 500,000 followers now at this point that care somewhat about wrestling, or at least enough to hit the follow button on social media. Why are we seeing negative growth in the sport rather than positive growth? There has to be some kind of.
When would you agree? Would you agree when most of your viewers are young kids and love the content that you're providing those young kids? So right now you have those young minds that you can use to grow our sport by marketing to them the correct way. And in your opinion, that's not happening.
Yes, absolutely. And then it's just simply like, if you were to, and also I also think the fan base does need to get wider, because I don't know if we're going to make it continue just keeping the fan base that we have. The strategy that has kind of been taken is get kids into wrestling, market specifically to wrestlers. A lot of FLO's content is marketed specifically to wrestlers. And I don't know if that's I don't know if there's enough of a fan base there to sustain the sport for however many years we want the sport to continue, because when all of your content is locked behind a paywall, it makes it very, very difficult. Like if I introduced a new activity to you and told you 3 days later, I want you to turn over $150. It doesn't matter that there's great content, that you get it for a year, that you get, Kyle Dake, training videos and technique videos with Jordan Burroughs, blah, 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 blah. For people that are just starting out in this sport, that is hearsay to them, right? It certainly took me a couple months of, investigating and learning about the sport to learn about all the big names that are in the sport. So if the majority of your content is locked up behind a paywall, yes, that's the reason why I believe, yes, the subscriber growth is still growing, but is the actual fan base reaching a wide enough market and they're able to sustain wrestling at a high level for many years to come? And I think that's where kind of FLO falls short.
And what do you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I read through this pretty quickly a couple times, but you had said that there's been, FLO asked for this subscriber money, this pay to watch our special money or pay-per-view money or whatever they're asking for, and then you get these live shows and the feeds just totally suck, or they get cut off, or they're out for 20 minutes, or they can't get it right. How I saw where you wrote that that's affecting the sport and causing people not to watch, where other sports that are in contact with FLO have decided, we'll just take our live stream shows and show it through a different
platform. Yes. And inherently this is the problem, because honestly, and you may have an answer to this that I don't, where do we take all our shows and all our live events? If in a hypothetical world, FLO no longer existed, where do we take all our shows?
Yeah, it would be difficult. We just had a gentleman, Jeremy Smith, and thank you for commenting, Jeremy. I appreciate it. We always like people to write in. He said people subscribe so they can see their kids wrestle at tournaments, not for the movies, man. What do you say to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, people subscribe. This is inherently the problem that I was trying to make. Yes, there are only so many wrestling parents out there, though. Is that enough to sustain the long-term longevity growth that is necessary to keep the sport involved mainstream for many years to come? Is it enough?
You're saying there should be with FLO's voice, and as large as they are, they should have some sort of campaign targeting the general public on why kids should wrestle, the positivity to why kids should get into wrestle, the first generation college students that are created from wrestling, things like that?
Like, I don't even think people need to get into wrestling. It's like, how do you get somebody like me, somebody who never had a parent that wrestled, never had anybody in my family that wrestled, basically turned on the TV, stumbled on the NCAA championships 4 years ago on accident. How do you keep them involved past just watching it one time or watching it every year when the NCAAs roll around? How do you sustain a large enough base so that everybody within the sport, not just FLO's bank account, can continue to grow?
Got it. So you wrote down here, your opinions on how you think they could get better, right? So you wrote down restructure the priorities of growing the sport along with growing the company was your first one.
Mm-hmm.
You wrote down find PR opportunities to share wrestling stories with the mainstream media, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You wrote down form a coalition of wrestlers demanding better from major wrestling media outlets as well as the national governing body, which women's wrestling has done. I had Julia Salata on yesterday. She started a campaign, How She Wrestles. She also is employed by Wrestle Like a Girl. So they have campaigns going to help their part of the sport. Demand that FLO allow creators to use their content for creator purposes only within reason under fair use laws. And I'm just going to read these and then let you kind of synopsis them. Is that a word? I think so, yeah. Demand that FLO leave a reasonable amount of content to non-paying customers for the purpose of growing the sport. For example, rankings, the majority of articles, some live streaming events. Allow competitors to openly cover FLO's events. Before the above 6 conditions are met, change is made. Avoid disclosing news or inside information to FLO. Do not agree to wrestle any matches under the FLO promotion unless payment amount and details are released to the public, and require a monthly report about the status and rough financials of FLO Sports, including official subscriber numbers. So those are 9 things that you wrote down, and to the public, we're going to release this. We'll release his findings so that you all can read this yourself and comment on it. Good or bad, he's happy to get into a debate with you. He's not afraid there. So please feel free to debate with him after the show. But go ahead and talk about those briefly and tell us what you mean by all that.
What I basically looked at was this whole situation kind of took me back to, I obviously am more kind of on the nerdy side. I'm not afraid to admit that. And I have been part of the chess community for a very, very long time. And the chess community kind of had the same chronic problems that the wrestling community did. The fan base was starting to dwindle, and we were having, the world championship, the chess world championship, the prize fund from the 1990s went from $2.4 million to, I think, just under $1 million. So, and also, when you listen to like really, really smart chess people do commentary, your mind goes for a spin. So what I basically looked at is within the past 2-3 years, ever since they kicked out their old president, the International Chess Federation, and brought in somebody new, they have made kind of a conscious effort to market to dumb people like myself that will never be super, super smart at chess. And that's ultimately what I think needs to be done here for wrestling. And I'll release my full doc and everything that I have. So first of all, there has to be a conscious effort to grow the sport alongside with the company, and such as, let's say somebody, gets into wrestling through a different platform, whether that's myself or whether that's through the World Wrestling Live show or anybody else. FLO should be appreciative of that and not attempting to continuously shut down competitors, even if they are within the legal right to do so, right? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know whether FLO's within the legal right to many of the legal disputes that they're going on with right now. But the ultimate point is, even if you are within the legal standing and you are correct, even if I grant you that you are correct legally to pursue the legal action that you are pursuing, you are diverting attention and capital away from growing the fan base of the sport in a time that is necessary. And then obviously too, find PR opportunities to share wrestling stories with the mainstream media. Like, let's be completely honest and objective. More people read major news networks such as, CNN, ESPN than FLO. So if we are not expanding our base and not getting more eyes on the sport of wrestling itself, not just FLO Wrestling's content, then I think that needs to be done first. And then, of course, form a coalition of wrestlers that demand better from them. That's, like you mentioned, Julia Salata has done very well with women's wrestling, but I think we also need a more general coalition that demands kind of these things be fixed as soon as we can. Like, also going back to kind of the comparisons with chess, a lot of chess tournaments have moved online with the pandemic, and a big chronic problem was when you're at home playing over the internet, you have the possibility of seeking help. And basically what happened was there was a huge cheating scandal within the community, and we had all the top chess players in the world basically sign a letter to the major chess media outlets and tell them that you need to proctor, if you're going to host events on your site, you need to proctor each individual players through necessary means, which means that basically this means that if people within the wrestling world use their platform, we can make the necessary changes and solve the chronic problems that are plaguing the sport. And then demand that FLO allow creators to use their content for creator purposes only within reason under fair use laws. We're not even asking that, we allow people to steal their broadcast rights and give live commentary. I think something within reason is that you take, let's say, an event that FLO has covered, and you take an article that FLO has written, or just a little video clip of a minute or two, and provide commentary or create satire or create a meme or whatever floats your boat, for also expanding the general public's knowledge on wrestling.
So you keep saying that they need to expand the general public's knowledge on wrestling. So let me understand. Now, first of all, what do you say to people that are going to say, come on, man, you're comparing us to chess, first of all, right? And then second of all, are you saying that not only should FLO be, doing their own thing, but they should also have maybe ads and marketing campaigns on other larger networks to help grow what they're doing, or help grow the sport, or help get the name out there? Or explain to me what you mean, because I keep hearing you say it, but I want to hear you expand on it.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, to the original point that we're comparing wrestling to chess, it's not that I think that, wrestling and chess are obviously two completely different things, but they faced many of the same structural issues within the community that the chess community has been able to solve with kind of the majority of things that have been done with over the past 5 years, right? Whenever you're trying to market a product to anybody, regardless that be a chess tournament, a wrestling tournament, pillows for, your bed, basic marketing principles still still apply in that when you are trying to grow a sport, you need enough eyeballs on it to keep it mainstream. And then also you talking about expanding the wider general base is that, like I said earlier, people aren't willing to turn over $150 instantly. So how can we, in their first 3 to 5 impressions on the sport of wrestling, not let it be that, page that FLO has put up behind every single article that says, sign in now to access this article. After reading that so many times and it being introduced to the sport as just a fan, not somebody who's willing to wrestle or ever wrestle. Trust me, I would never try. I'm not athletically gifted at all. How can we keep them captivated? And when the majority of your content is hidden behind a paywall, it makes it very, very difficult to keep the people's attention and retain them so we can continue to grow the sport of wrestling and create more opportunities.
Now right now, AJ Greaves brings up a really good point. Not sure I've ever seen a FLO film on Stanford wrestling. There's a ton of content about Iowa. They just completed a 3-part series on Penn State. The only female film I have seen is on our Olympic champ, Helen. They seem to focus on just a few different programs and not all D1 programs, which they should focus on, correct? And especially right now with what's going on with Stanford wrestling, you would think they'd go to the archives and start just puking Stanford wrestling on everybody to show people the history and the importance of it. But I believe what he's saying is, if you're only focusing on Iowa and Penn State and one girl, you're missing 99.9% of everyone else, and you're not marketing properly, right?
Right, but there's that problem in itself, which I haven't even gotten into. There's an even bigger problem that even the people that love to watch Iowa and love to watch Penn State and love to watch the programs that they puke out over and over and over again, I will pay somebody a decent amount of money to scroll through FLO's 12, 13,000 posts and see how many posts of Austin DeSanto there are on there. It's a ridiculous number. Even with that, my argument is, or my question that I pose to the community, it's not really that I'm arguing, I'm just trying to bring a new perspective to somebody that hasn't, been involved in the wrestling community for as long as maybe all my fellow co-hosts have been. Is there even enough under that larger tent that people care about Penn State and Iowa to sustain wrestling, not even just in the US college level, like something that I didn't even put in this document? Think about why we literally had to bribe or fight with the IOC to keep wrestling involved in 2020 for the Olympics.
Yeah, and it was the women that got us back in the Olympics, by the way.
Yeah.
But also, I know that they do showcase some of the lower divisions, but I feel like only a small percentage. I mean, I think every kid dreams to wrestle D1. But one of my goals has been with this show is to showcase wrestling as a,
Yes.
and I have had NAIA guys on here, club wrestling coaches and wrestlers on here, D3, D2, and D1. And one of the big things is, if we're going to grow wrestling, we have to grow it so people know about everything. Kids need to know that wrestling can get me into school. Wrestling is the #1 vehicle for first generation college students. Wrestling can get you an education, not just the D1 level, but at every level. And it can be a vehicle to get you even further in life. And I think by only showcasing the top programs, you may be shattering dreams too early and not allowing those kids to continue, because their dreams may end at, wow, I'm never going to make it to Iowa or Penn State, and those are the only teams that matter. When, yes, this is not an anti-Iowa or Penn State. They do matter. We love them. We love all the guys there. but all wrestling matters, and people need to understand that, correct?
Right, of course. And the question is, how many programs outside of Iowa, Penn State, the hegemonic schools in the Big Ten and the big schools in the ACC 20, 30 years down the line, how many of those programs are going to be left? Remember, once upon a time, even just within the past 15 years, we went from 88 programs to 75 for the 2018 to 2019 academic year. And that number is only going to get worse with Old Dominion being cut and Stanford being cut. So we're down to, I think, 74 because there was the creation of Arkansas Little Rock within that time frame. No sport with at least minimum 50 programs over that same time frame has experienced as much negative growth over that same time frame as far as number of programs. So with you pointing out that wrestling is the number one tool for first generation students to get into college, will it continue to be if we don't make some drastic and necessary changes in the way we market wrestling? Will it continue to be 20, 30 years down the line when the people in college that we love watching right now, their sons are, beginning to apply for colleges? And how many of those programs will be left? And when you're looking at the numbers and you're looking at the negative growth that has plagued the D1 college wrestling for the past 15 years, and your AD comes in and says, hey, we've got this whole coronavirus thing going on. We're not going to be able to sell football tickets. The athletic department's revenue is going to be cut by a drastic amount this year. I need you to make just 5%, cut 2, 5, whatever the number is, percent of your budget. And then so the AD starts looking at the sports, which sports overall throughout NCAA Division I are not growing right now. And the sport that comes in last place out of the 30 sports on my spreadsheet is wrestling. So any normal athletic director who hasn't experienced wrestling, hasn't experienced how difficult wrestling is, because you ask any athlete, any student athlete, which one's the hardest sport? The one they play. So the athletic director says, well, which sport is not making our university any money at all, and which sport has also been decided by my peers that does not have a chance of growing? And within the past 13 years, no sport has, except for wrestling, has reported a negative growth of double digits, of almost 15%. When you have programs, when you have sports that are already at over 200-300 schools, there are 351 Division I collegiate programs this year. Only 75 have wrestling. So when you look at other major sports, such as baseball, even though they had 296 programs in 2007, they've now increased to 317. Even the biggest hegemonic sports that already have a large fan base are continuing to get bigger because content is readily available to the general public.
So to put a bow on this, Daniel, yeah. And obviously I know you're going to go on my page and you're going to release your docs under the comments, and you're going to, you'll be available if people want to chat with you. But just to put a bow on this, with that being said, tell us what you believe, in a short answer, what is the biggest thing that needs to change for us to kind of stop the bleeding?
If I were to sum it up in 3 words, probably just expand the fan base. That's the number one thing. We need to get more eyes on wrestling. Whether that's paying, whether that's through, different mediums, whether that's through FLO, without FLO, we need to get more of the general population's eyes on wrestling. Because the more we do that, if we don't even get their eyes on wrestling, we have no chance of retaining them to be a fan for years to come, and we need fans right now.
Well said. Very well said, Daniel. And man, thank you so much for reaching out to me, and thank you for for speaking on behalf of our sport. And I look forward to you releasing the information, the findings on the comments when we hang up, and allowing people to be able to see what you found. And awesome, man, just awesome. I just wanted to say thank you. It was an honor to have you on.
I know I've already gone way over my time, but can I read like a letter that I wrote?
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I've already gone way over my time.
No.
Debaters love to talk.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Read your letter.
Dear the wrestling community, my thoughts after doing a decent amount of research. This is my opinion and my opinion only. Wrestling is dying. At the time of this writing, I've done about 10 interviews with college wrestlers. Each of them has impressed me with their humbleness, self-confidence, and pure excitement when talking about the sport. Wrestling deserves to be on a larger platform, there's no question. But being a wrestling outsider and having never wrestled, I can easily see why the wrestling community is seen as snobbish, even though it is anything but. As the cliche goes, the first impression is the most important impression. I don't know of any other sport that charges $150 for people to view rankings, and it doesn't matter how much amazing content FLO produces. I've heard the films are actually pretty good, never watched any though. The overall issue at hand is that the overall fan base for wrestling is dwindling, and has been dwindling for a long time. I cannot blame FLO entirely, nor are they the only problem. But what I hope I've made clear in this document that you'll see later is that for as much as on the surface level it looks like FLO has helped grow the sport of wrestling, it has only made the ship sink faster. From 1999 to 2007, we had a net loss of 1 Division I program, but that number has risen to 13 since FLO has been created and is only going to get worse as Old Dominion is being cut this year and Stanford is being cut next year. Ask yourself this question. If you were an athletic director and presented with the same statistics I just presented you with, and asked you to make any kind of budget cut, any reasonable person would say, based on the numbers, wrestling would be the first sport to go. You have to understand that very few athletic directors have ever experienced the blood, sweat, and tears that are required to learn and perfect wrestling. You must understand that any student athlete, regardless of what sport they play, will tell you that the sport that they play is the hardest one. And as sad as it sounds, colleges at the end of the day must use a utilitarianism framework to evaluate problems. I'm begging the wrestling community to see where I'm coming from. We've fallen for FLO's trap for far too long. FLO is using classic diversion tactics to try and shift the blame and take advantage of America's public perception that top-tier institutions such as Stanford are these corrupt colleges with massive endowment funds, and they're just refusing to use the money to support the athletes. Although that may be partially true, it does not make any sense why wrestling seems to be the only one suffering. As the old saying goes, don't shoot the messenger. Mark Tessier-Levine and Ben Arkmir, the Stanford president and athletic director, are simply just the messengers in this scenario. We must think of the long-term game before it is too late. We must realize that this is the classic example of the enemy being right under our noses. We must have a full and comprehensive reevaluation of how the sport is marketed to the general public. I encourage everyone to go watch your interview of the Stanford wrestlers. If it doesn't break your heart, please go seek professional medical help immediately. I don't know Real, Jackson, or any of the other Stanford guys personally, and my body, after sitting through that hour-long interview, felt a level of anger, hurt, and sadness that I don't think I've ever quite felt before. Watching Real Woods talk about his medical school aspirations and how hard he had worked to get into Stanford was an unbelievable story. Around the same time of watching that interview, I had just finished interviewing Noah Gonzer for my show, who had to transfer to Campbell after the program at Eastern Michigan got cut. And even though Noah is a rather soft-spoken guy and one of the nicest people I've ever had the pleasure of interviewing, I could still feel the pain through a Zoom call, even given after 2 years to process everything. These are real people whose livelihoods depend on these programs. Ask yourself this, in 20 years' time, when it's time for my generation to start families and send kids off to high school, will there even be D1 college wrestling left? And if so, how many programs will there be? If your child is talented in multiple sports, when you're planning for his future, his or her future, will it even be worth the time and money to invest into wrestling? So the next time your FLO membership expires, think about your favorite college wrestler and know that the uncertainty of our economy and affairs as a country at large, no program is ever too safe. If you genuinely care about the future and the sport of wrestling, Who can the $150 benefit more? FLO's bank account or Realwood's future? This coronavirus pandemic will only begin to deteriorate faster with COVID-19 thrown in the mix. Wrestling's biggest match is coming up. And for as much as FLO would like you to believe that it's Dave versus Chamizo or Taylor versus Martin, it's not. It's wrestling against itself for the battle to stay alive. Everyone is invited. Everyone can help prepare. Everyone can contribute. We can win. The only question is whether we'll have the grit and determination to do it. In the meantime, I'll do whatever I can to help out and continue to provide information and try to educate everybody. But the reality is I don't have the platform that wrestlers do, and only for as much as I will try to understand from an outsider's point of view how hard wrestling is, nothing can replace personal experience. I'll leave the fighting up to you on this one. Use your platforms, fight for change, leave the sport in a better place than you found it. I'll be rooting for you.
That was incredible. And I'm honored that you shared it on my show. I hope that more people, or a lot of people, hear this. I shared it throughout all my platforms. I will add it to my YouTube and my Anchor and everything as well. But incredible. Appreciate you. I really hope your voice is heard on this and change is made. Thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for reaching out to me, and keep kicking life's ass, my man, and doing big things, and enjoy your day.
Thank you so much. And thank you for letting me come on.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure to have you on. And as I said, you reached out and I said yes. So thank you so much. And I'm glad I did.
All right. Thank you. Have a good one.
You as well.